The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
So that was Pete Hegseth, the US's new Secretary of Defense, talking about America's conditions for negotiations of bringing a peaceful end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, Trump has already mentioned that he's had a 1.5-hour phone call with Putin, and that they're going to meet. They've got their teams negotiated. Russia have said their red lines, that Ukraine can't be a member of NATO, that they will continue to hold the ground that they've taken in Ukraine, that Ukraine mustn't have an army, that there should be no foreign troops in Ukraine, and that Ukraine shouldn't be a member of NATO. And Hegseth, basically, you just heard what he said, but the first thing is that Ukraine, it's not likely that an outcome will be that Ukraine will join NATO. Now, this is something that, had Biden have just come out and said, the war would have probably never have started. But apparently privately Biden believed that, and even to the end of his term he actually, I think, came out and said that. But the other point is, if you look at the Minsk agreements that were backed by the EU, that Merkel went on later to say they were just a stalling tactic. Although Ukraine weren't a member of NATO, it seemed that NATO were already in Ukraine. They were building up a big army in Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. And again, this was all pushed by the government. The backstory to this, as far as Russia are concerned, was that Russia were promised that NATO would never expand up to its border, and the America and to some extent Europe continue to push that and push that. But anyway, so Hegseth said the Ukraine won't join NATO. He then went on to say that as any peacekeeping force within NATO will not be covered by Article 5. Now, Russia have already said that any foreign troops within Ukraine will be just seen as fair game. So what this Article 5 means is that if those troops are attacked, Article 5 means if one NATO member is attacked, that they should, all the other NATO members should retaliate, or, you know, against the attacker. But Hegseth has explicitly said that any troops that form part of a peacekeeping force along the line of contact will not be a NATO force. And he then went on to say that even those troops, the US will not deploy any troops within Ukraine at all. So it's fairly obvious that the US are wanting to sort of wash their hands of the whole Ukraine conflict. Now, I can understand this from Trump's point of view. This was something that was Biden's pet project. For whatever reason, maybe Zelensky or Ukraine had got something on Biden. But Trump obviously doesn't want to be seen as being the one that takes on this problem. Trump and his administration seem to really want to pivot to containing China. So they want to get rid of this whole Ukraine thing. And I think he's actually been advised by numerous people that, don't take this whole thing on. As far as Trump concerned, it was Biden's project and he wants nothing to do with it. So he basically wants to walk away from it. However, he comes out with some strange things. I mean, one day he says one thing, one day he says another, but his latest thing is that he now wants Ukraine to repay all the money that has been spent there. So Trump very much sees everything as a business transaction. He sees that all this money has been given to Ukraine in both money as support and weapons, and he wants payback. Now, he suggests that Ukraine has a lot of minerals, rare earths, mines and stuff, and Trump has said that in repayment of all this money and weapons that America have supplied to Ukraine, he wants to be repaid with these rare earth minerals and these sort of stuff from the mines, basically. Well, what I find a bit strange about this is, as far as I understand, the majority of those mines and rare earth deposits under land and territory that Russia now occupies, and it's highly unlikely Russia are going to give that territory back. What you've got to remember here with a lot of this is that Russia are going to be very wary of trusting anything the US or Europe tells them or suggests, because time after time after time, agreements have been made by the US and Russia, and the US have backtracked on those agreements years later. This has happened numerous times, and even with the Minsk agreements, they were put together by Europe, and then later Angela Merkel came out and said, they were just a stalling tactic. So actually Russia have very little trust in the US or Europe. Now, one thing that's come out of Hegseth and Trump basically wanting to wash their hands of the whole Ukraine debacle is that now Europe are kind of gone into panic mode. So they've come out with all these sort of statements that they're going to stand with Ukraine and do whatever it takes, and that's all well and good, right? But the thing is, by Europe sort of going along with the US and not looking after their own security, they're in no position to, and pretty much Trump has kind of just sidelined them, really. He's basically said that the outcome of the war will be decided by himself and Vladimir Putin of Russia. So the Europeans are obviously not very happy about this, but and as I say, it's all well and good them saying we stand by Ukraine and we're going to do. They've convened a meeting where they're all going to meet and decide what to do. But the bottom line is, by following America, they've devastated their own economies because they now refuse to buy energy from Russia. So their economies are in deep trouble. So this is standing by Ukraine and helping them and supplying them. To what end? They don't have the money and they don't have the weapons. So without America, what are they going to do? Now, anybody who's been following this, and when I say following it, I don't mean in mainstream media, because mainstream media have been pushing the narrative to most people in the West that, Ukraine are winning this war, but all along the front line it's been Russia that are advancing. Now, it's quite clear that Ukraine are not winning. I mean, if you believe sort of the Europeans, you had von der Leyen saying early on that the Russians were getting old washing machines to take the chips out to put in their missiles, and then I think somebody else said the Russian army was fighting with shovels. And their whole thing, I mean, this whole Ukrainian war started because America, or Biden, wanted to weaken Russia. And exactly the opposite has happened. Russia's economy has actually got stronger. Their army has got stronger. Their army is much more experienced. So it's all completely backfired on them, and now they're in a situation where Ukraine is losing. Now, even if Europe came up with huge amounts of weapons and give them to Ukraine, who are going to use them? Because there's a couple of problems here. So Ukraine are already short on men. They're offering all sorts of incentives, like to Ukrainian soldiers to join the army. They've lowered the conscription age to 18 years old, and they've promised them to have a house, you know, and this and that and the other. They've promised them all these things. Yet the average lifespan of a Ukrainian on the front line is a few days. So what use is all those gifts to offer them to sign up for the army? Anyway, Ukraine are running really short on men, and a lot of the equipment that Europe may give, the Ukrainians don't know how to use it because they're used to old Soviet era weaponry and to operate that. So they can't operate this sort of new modern European weaponry. So that means that actually Europe would have to send personnel to Ukraine to operate a lot of their equipment. Now, we've already seen this with the HIMARS and the Storm Shadows, and you know, again, Russia have said, and they've actually targeted and taken out numerous foreign operatives within Ukraine. So I think that you know, the European Union talk a lot of bravado, but when push comes to shove, they've really got very little to offer. And you know, a lot of Europeans are sort of fuming now that basically Trump has sidelined them. But I think that there's more to come. I think, you know, we've already seen Trump impose tariffs on European steel and aluminium, and I think there's a lot more to come. It's, you know, that the Europeans backed the wrong horse. They became vassals to America, and now Trump has got his new plan that, you know, I'm going to look after America, and he doesn't really give much of a toss about the Europeans. So they're now in a bit of a difficult situation. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But as always, for now, take care.